early in the morning, wearing the same jersey I wore to bed last night. I didn't wear it to bed. I went to bed and left it next to the bed, and now it's on again. So ignore the fact I'm still wearing Islanders. There seems to be some confusion when it comes to power rankings. Did I have any real control over where teams end up? That I look at this board and I go, well, I'm not going to move this team up because I don't like them. Which is why the Ducks moved up. During a week that they didn't have a great record. The fact is, I don't have any emotional stakes in where teams end up. And the fact the Bruins are ninth, it makes me as uncomfortable as anybody else. It's like, oh, crap. One of my teams is doing well. I'm going to get in trouble. The Bruins have won 8 out of 10. Vegas has won 7 out of 10. Vegas is top 5 in the league, and Vegas fans and people who, in general, want to look and pick apart my rankings are not happy with me having Vegas at 13th. And I can almost guarantee you that every other website's going to have Vegas top 5 and talk about what a great story they are. And fine. But my power rankings don't work that way. This is the last 7 games played by Vegas. This is since the power rankings 2 weeks ago. These are the 6 games played by Boston 2 weeks ago. Or in the last 2 weeks since those power rankings were put up. Let's look at them. So, you got a loss here for Vegas to Dallas 3-0. They went out on the road. They lost 4-3 to Minnesota. They lost 7-4 to Winnipeg. Then, at that point, they had dropped to 17th in the power rankings. Now, over the last week, sure, they've got a good record. They beat Arizona in overtime, which didn't move them on the charts. Have you seen Arizona lately? Didn't move them on the charts. They beat Anaheim in a shootout. I qualify those as ties. I'm sorry. You can have a 3-on-3 in overtime. You can have a 3-on-3 during the playoffs. You can. It's rare, but it does sometimes happen where you get in these fight-filled games or penalty-filled games and it's a 3-on-3. It can happen. You can't go below that, but you can have 3-on-3. Shootouts don't happen. So I don't look at a shootout win and say, wow, that's great, and move them up the power rankings based on a shootout win. Now, if you lose in a shootout to, say, Buffalo, okay, let's say Tampa loses in a shootout to Buffalo, and St. Louis gets to a shootout and loses against, say, New Jersey. I'll put more weight on what happened with Tampa than St. Louis because Tampa got forced into it by the lowest ranked team, and St. Louis, it was a team that was about 10th. The way that I do this is that. And every night it's a fresh look at it. So when I look at Vegas and I say, well, it's a shootout win, this didn't move them because they beat a team that's 25th. So let's take a look at strength of opposition. 16th on there. I believe Minnesota, yeah, they're 18th. Winnipeg, they're down to 7th. Arizona's 30th. Anaheim's 25th. Now, they get a shootout win over Nashville, which again I treat like a tie. Nashville's down to 4th on this list. And then they beat Dallas. So this is a legit win. And this is their first win in regulation in their last 7 games. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from what Vegas has been doing. But this was the first win they've had that would have moved them up 2 spots on the power rankings. Vegas is making hay in overtime in the shootout. Fine. They've also had teams 16, 18, 7, 30, 25, 4, 16. They haven't been playing, other than that game against Nashville, or the game against Winnipeg, and those are division rivals, they haven't been playing the top teams. And when they do, Nashville was a shootout and they lost to Winnipeg. Notice, 2 wins, 3 losses, 2 ties. That's why Vegas is 13th. That's what it is. And I'm not going to change the way I do my power rankings because what it does is it takes the shootout wins that make your record look really good and it just takes them right out of there. Because, again, and I've said this for weeks now. The only reason I'm doing this video is because there's a perception that somehow I'm playing favorites. Because, how dare I? Now look over at Boston. They lose to Edmonton. Remember, this is going back 2 weeks. They beat Tampa Bay. They get a shutout win over Philly. They lose to Nashville. They trash Arizona. And last night, they beat the Islanders. All of their wins are in regulation. In terms of their opposition, Edmonton's number 21. Tampa's number 1. Philly's 26. Yep. They lost to Nashville, number 4. Beat number 30. And then they beat number 11. But the only reason Boston isn't higher than 9th is because they've had lesser opposition. And it's weird because they have one of the best records over the last 2 weeks. And I've got them at 9th. I've got them behind Washington. But I have them ahead of Vegas. They're 4-2 in the last 2 weeks. Boston's 4-2. The last 2 weeks, Vegas is 2-3-2. That's why Boston is ahead of Vegas. Boston got a win over Tampa a week and a half ago. That bumped them up a lot. They haven't played Tampa. Not in the last 2 weeks. Keep in mind, after this, they were 17th. 2 shootout wins, an overtime win, and a regulation win. Is that really supposed to move them up into the top tier? So they would pass the Rangers, Islanders, New Jersey, Boston, and Washington, and Winnipeg to move into the top tier. They belong ahead of Winnipeg with that record over the last 2 weeks. My point is, if these results cause Vegas to jump up into the top row, I need to stop doing this. There is no emotion that goes into these rankings. None. Vegas, yeah, they get wins. And by my scoring system, they get ties. And ties don't make a big difference in terms of rankings. They moved up to 17 because I moved them up 1 spot here. No. The win over Arizona, I looked at and I said no, because they'd lost 3 in a row coming into that game. I thought the win against Arizona is fine, but that didn't move them up. It was an overtime win. The win over Nashville, I moved them up 1. The win over Dallas, I moved them up 2. They got passed. I'm trying to remember who passed them. See, and then I start second guessing, but it works. Yeah, they moved up 4 spots in the last week. I moved them up 1, 1, and 2. The Arizona one, I didn't move them up, based on the fact that Arizona's so far down. I moved Boston up 1 with their win over Arizona because they won it 6-1. Not on Scott Wedgwood, not his fault. They moved up 3 spots on this one because they beat the Islanders. And they passed the Islanders. So they passed the Rangers, the Islanders, and the Devils. But again, this is going to be an argument every single week. Because people just look, they look at what Vegas has done and they go 4 in a row. They've won 4 in a row. They have to be top 7. I look and say they've won 2 and they've tied 2. That's what it is. That's the whole deal. There's no bias. I like the Vegas story. I think it's a great story. I also think these guys are getting a lot of points in overtime in the shootout. They're doing what other teams aren't doing. But all of Boston's wins come in regulation. So what's more impressive, a 6-1 win over Arizona or a 3-2 win over Arizona in overtime? A shootout win over Nashville or regulation win over Tampa? A 3-1 win over the Islanders or a 5-3 win over Dallas. And Dallas is back to it's frustrating watching Dallas right now. And Dallas is 16th on this thing, and the Islanders are 11th. So that's why. That's why Vegas is 13th. And I knew when I did these rankings, I knew when I looked last night, I thought people are going to be upset with me over Vegas. But I don't want to over-explain it. I don't want to try to apologize for the fact Vegas is 13th, because then I'm completely destroying the point in doing power rankings every week. Like I said, I guarantee TSN, ESPN, Sportsnet, almost any of them are just going to look, they're going to go, oh, they won 4 in a row this week, they're up to this number. My rankings don't do that. Because as soon as it's just wins and losses, I'm going to throw the power rankings board out. There's no point in having it. You guys can see who won and who lost. The point of this board is to say, how did they win? Who's playing the best hockey right now? And to not have, a situation where, let's say Nashville loses to Buffalo tonight, and they're not playing each other tonight. Let's say Nashville loses to Buffalo. Nashville doesn't drop 10 spots. The most I usually have a team drop by if they have a really disappointing game against a really lower light team in the NHL is three spots. But that also means that's the most a team likely moves up, is 3 spots. Unless there's more teams ahead of them that lose badly. Then I'm willing to move them up 4 or 5. So what people are saying is Vegas, who was 17 last week, should have moved up by about 10 spots based on a win over Arizona, shootout wins over Nashville and Anaheim, and then a win over Dallas. That should have moved them up by 10 spots. Because I didn't hear any complaining last week when they were 17th after getting killed by Winnipeg, shut out by Dallas, and coming up short against Minnesota. So you can't agree with this ranking and then look at this one and say, oh, well, no, you're wrong. Okay. But there's no emotion in this. Because I'm left with 2 options here. Either I do this, or I just take my favorite teams, Vancouver, Boston, and Dallas, and pull them off the board. And I don't want to do that. Vancouver's 21st. They beat Nashville, they beat Toronto, and I still have them 21st. Because they lost to Philly and they lost to Calgary. So yeah, they're 21st. And I didn't see Canuck fans screaming last week after they beat Toronto and they were still 19th on this thing. And they'd beaten Nashville before that. And Nashville, at the time, was number 1 on the chart. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. But I will defend that board. I'll defend it. Why is New Jersey still 10th? They beat Columbus. Yeah, they've lost their last couple. Before they lost those last 2, they were up to 7th on this board. Toronto was in 8th. Bumped up to 6th. I had Winnipeg out of the top row not that long ago. But again, you guys don't see that because it's in between. So there you go. Defending why these guys are 9 and these guys are 13. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And the board is not biased. As much as I'd like it to be sometimes, it's not biased. It's reflecting who has the better play going right now. At the end of every night, I look at the result, look where everybody is, and I move them on the board accordingly. And there are times I move people and I go, man, really? How are they this low? How are these teams this high? But when I analyze it, yeah, it works. And this is one of those times. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.